Before sunrise, in a hollow so narrow the fog doesn't burn off till 9, a boy is dragging logs out of a slash pile. Not good logs. These are the culls, bent red oak, hollow-hearted maple, beech nobody bothers splitting for firewood. The kind of wood that gets bulldozed into a burn pile every spring and set on fire just to clear the yard. He stacks them crisscross under a stand of hemlock, pulls a cordless drill from his coat, and starts boring holes into the bark, rows of them, evenly spaced, like a woodpecker with a ruler. By the time the sky turns the color of a fresh bruise, he's drilled 60 holes into wood that, by every account in this hollow, was already trash. Stick around. By the end, you'll know exactly what he was building. If you're new here, consider subscribing and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. We like knowing who's riding along. Now let's go back to the beginning. Turkey Fork Hollow sits in the eastern spine of West Virginia, pinched between two ridgelines so steep that satellite internet arrived a decade late. One gas station, a Baptist church, and a sawmill, Soward's Lumber. That's been the hollow's backbone since the 70s. Wyatt Combs grew up a half-mile from that mill, the kind of kid teachers called quiet as a compliment. He worked like something was chasing him, though nothing was. He just liked doing things right, slowly, on his own. His father did shift maintenance at a poultry plant 2 counties over. Money was tight in the quiet way, where shoes wait till they split. What the hollow has in abundance is timber, second-growth hardwood, logged hard a generation back, left wild since. And with logging comes waste. Culled logs, bent trunks, trees too knotted to mill, dragged into slash piles, and burned because hauling them costs more than they're worth. That was the pile Wyatt started pulling from at 17. Because he'd read something on a library computer about growing shiitake mushrooms on hardwood logs, and it wouldn't come loose from his head. The man who taught him to do it right was Odell Pruitt, 71, a retired state forester who grew mushrooms in retirement to pay for truck fuel and not much else. Odell didn't want anything to do with him at first. The boy stood at his gate 3 times before Odell even came out, and told him not to come back till he had real logs and real questions. Wyatt returned 2 days later with a truck bed of oak he'd bucked himself, and 6 questions on notebook paper. That was enough for Odell. He'd spent 30 years watching men want the reward without the labor. He knew the other kind when he saw it. The wisdom Odell handed him early stuck for years. Mushrooms don't care how bad you want it. They care whether the wood's ready. Your job ain't to make something happen. It's to get out of the way and let the wood do what wood does. The first batch failed almost completely. Wyatt cut logs in July, when sap runs high, instead of winter dormancy like Odell told him, and wild fungi beat his spawn to the wood. Out of 40 logs, 6 fruited. The second mistake was moisture. Logs stacked in full sun dried out before the mycelium could colonize. After that, he built a proper north-facing shade structure from scrap tin and hemlock boughs. The third was patience. He force-soaked logs that hadn't finished their spawn run and got a thin, disappointing flush, weeks too early. Word got around. Dale Sowards, who ran the mill and had known Wyatt's father 20 years, said loud enough to be overheard that the boy was growing mold on firewood. But a few people started asking quiet questions instead, and Wyatt's friend Cody Absher, who didn't understand the biology at all, kept showing up Saturdays anyway to haul logs, because that's what you do for a friend. The turn came without Wyatt saying a word. At the church's spring fundraiser dinner, his mother brought a skillet of his shiitakes, sautéed simple, set beside a tray of store-bought button mushrooms cooked the same way. By the meal's end, Wyatt's skillet was scraped clean. The store-bought tray still had half a pan left. Nobody announced anything. A skillet either gets eaten, or it doesn't. Dale Sowards ate 3 helpings and said nothing to anyone. But weeks later, his wife mentioned to Wyatt's mother that Dale had asked, almost in passing, whether the boy needed more of those culled logs from the mill yard. The real test came the second winter, with Wyatt up to nearly 400 logs. Green mold, trichoderma, an aggressive competitor fungus, showed up on a dozen logs and spread to 60 within 3 weeks, roughly 15% of everything he had. Wyatt and Cody pulled every infected log by hand, burned the worst to stop the spores spreading, and rebuilt the shade structures with wider spacing for airflow, the way Odell had been trying to teach him from the start. It wasn't triumphant, just 2 exhausted teenagers hauling moldy oak logs in the cold, while an old man told them what he was seeing. But they held the line. About 85% of the operation survived, stronger than before. By his second full harvest, Wyatt was selling shiitake and a side crop of oyster mushrooms, grown on straw and spent brewery grain, at the county farmers market, then to a diner, then a produce stand supplying 2 restaurants chasing a farm-to-table menu. Winter stayed hardest. Log-grown mushrooms don't fruit reliably in deep cold, so he learned to stagger production, force-fruiting some logs through cold water soaks while resting the rest. Dale's arc was slow and wordless. He started setting aside culled logs for Wyatt instead of burning them, first without saying so, then as a standing habit. He never apologized. He just started showing up at the market table on Saturdays, buying a bag for his wife, lingering a few extra minutes each time. It was Dale who finally said what the hollow had been circling around. An ordinary Saturday. No drama. He picked up a bag of shiitakes, turned it over to check the price, and said, mostly to himself, "Never figured wood we were fixing to burn would end up being worth more than the lumber." That was it. No speech, no apology. Just an old sawmill man doing the arithmetic out loud and letting it speak for him. Turkey Fork Hollow doesn't look dramatically different today. The mill still runs, but a couple of Wyatt's old skeptics now run small log-grown operations of their own, taught by Wyatt, who, true to Odell's lesson, never rushes anybody through it. Wyatt's 21 now, leasing 3 acres, running close to 900 logs, paying Cody a real wage instead of asking favors. Odell still stops by most weeks, more for company than need. What changed in this hollow wasn't the economy. It was smaller than that. A quiet kid looked at a pile of wood everyone else had written off, and instead of arguing with the doubters, he let the wood do what wood does, and gave it enough time to prove itself. That's the story from Turkey Fork Hollow. If you enjoyed it, subscribe for more, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. See you next time.